That's the route he took. He purged the party. Now, the Conservatives are in that position. We've had a bunch of, I don't want to use derogatory terms, but we've had a bunch of people that have been in control of this party that don't appeal to your standard Conservative voter. They're appealing to the fringe voters or whatever you want to call them, but they're not typical Conservative people. People like Kwasi Kwarteng's, his theories on economics are not typical, conservative theories on economics. They're not, and certainly not.
They're not one nation Tory. They're rabid free marketing. So you're positing the existence of people who could steer the Conservative Party back to a more sensible place.
Well, I think there are.
Who? I'm going to push you on this.
Okay. Well, I was saying to your researcher, if I think it's actually the problem we got here is that there's too many people that want that who are now vying for the spot. If it was simply a matter of, okay, Liz Truss is using Rishi Sunak's policies, let's just get Rishi Sunak in, that may have solved the problem. But the problem is now is that everybody in their own.
Then we're back to my triangle, my triangle of alliteration. So the magnitude of the mess, the depth of the division, and the tyranny of the talentless. Let's say Rishi Sunak solves the tyranny of the talentless problem. I'm afraid he gets done by the depth of the division. He's perceived as one of the people who got rid of Boris Johnson, which some members of the Conservative Parliamentary Party and perhaps more importantly the membership at large will never forgive him for.
Well, exactly, and this is why. Well, I was making the point was that I think there's two ways it can go, because I don't think that the Tory party is going to be written off. The reason I say that is there's two ways it can go, because I say this also because the Labour Party.
Go on quickly.
Yeah. They haven't put forward a cohesive plan for what they would do as yet, a costed plan. So it's either going to be, they all get together and Rishi Sunak comes in, or Boris comes back because he's got the popular support. It's one or the other. That's what I think is going to happen.
Okay, I think I disagree, but who knows? I mean, I think this is one of those areas where if you claim that your instincts or your analyses are copper bottomed, then you're on a hiding to nothing. I can't see Sunak or Johnson coming back because of point two, depth of the division. Also, Johnson's got the law breaking hanging over him, the corona. I mean, people like Nadine Dorries might like him, and some members of the Conservative grassroots might like him, but it's frying pan into fire and then back into the frying pan again. It defies the laws of logic, but we shall see. Patricia is in London. That's not very specific. Patricia, what would you like to say?
Hello. I'll try and keep it short.
Okay.
I think all the parties, all the politicians should go, a lot of them.
Right. Well, you kept it short. Rob's in Sheffield. Rob, what would you like to say?
Oh, sorry, you're on speaker. I wasn't queued up. Hello. I don't think they're going to go.
No, I don't. I mean, probably should clarify this. I'm not suggesting that they're going to be obliterated out of existence forever. I'm just wondering what the way back is from the current mess to something that remotely resembles the Conservative Party that we used to know.
Reinvention.
Yes.
Reinvention. They are masters of reinvention.
Ruthless reinventors.
Yes. Like you look at the Michael Foot. You look at the victory that Margaret Thatcher had over Michael Foot in 1979.
83. It was Jim Callaghan in 79.
82.
Yeah.
It was Jim. Yeah, but
83.
People would have been looking at the Labour Party and thought, well, how are they going to get themselves back? They came back with Tony Blair. You look at the Thatcherite Conservative Party. They came back, they reinvented themselves, they became the David Cameron, the One Nation, the Wets of the Conservative Party. Point. And then within 10 years, they've reinvented themselves from the David Cameron version of the Tory Party to the Boris Johnson, Liz Truss.
Yes.
You look at the Liberal Democrats, and they went from the 2015 collapse, and they're still going, and they've reinvented themselves within internationalism. The Conservative Party, they have got a base. They have got 30% of the local councillors in the UK. They have still got money, they have still got support, and they've still got media influence.
Who leads the reinvention? I think your analysis is brilliant and almost certainly right. The only fly in the ointment of it is the unprecedented nature of recent events, and of course Brexit being something that's changed everything, because that 2019 intake of Conservatives, they're even madder than Liz Truss.
They will reinvent.
Yeah, but how? Who's going to be there? You've got people like Jonathan Gullis and 30p Lee. That's the new breed of Conservative MPs. They are the most recent arrivals. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 26.
Right, perfect. Who from your age group, let's say it's a 10-year rehabilitation for the Tories, who's going to want to be part of it from your generation?
There are always people of every generation that chime, and
you can't have that as an answer. That people, who's going to do it? People, James. People, some people. Who from you? Do you know any 26-year-olds?
Yeah, I do.
Right,
I do.
Who want to steer the Conservative Party back to the sort of era of back to John Major or back to a kind of
back to a Cameron type of Tory party. Let me put some names out for you.
All right.
Tobias Ellwood.
I thought you were going to give me your mates' names. Yeah, but Tobias Ellwood wants to rejoin the single market.
Yeah, but that's the thing. And you look at Australia, you look at how the reinvention of the Conservative Party in Australia is coming through the tail independence.
Yeah.
They are environmentally conscious, but fiscally conservative groups of people for which younger people and especially women are looking for, because they look at the changes that are happening and like, actually, we need a financially conservative but environmentally conscious. There are people like Tobias Ellwood who looks towards a single market, Caroline Noakes, Alicia Kearns, they are all of the younger end of the Conservative Party, the more sane end of the Conservative Party.
People we haven't been hearing from much in recent years for obvious reasons.
They're sitting back, but they're not going to be at the front when it comes to these leaderships, because they're not going to want to take on the mantle of the mess that's currently being made. That's why I would predict the best thing for the Conservative Party to do is to call an election, lose hard, and rebuild themselves, because if they have this for 2 years, then they will be scarred for even longer.
Yeah. Are you involved in politics yourself?
I am involved in politics.
Are you a Conservative activist?
I'm not, no.
What are you?
No, but I'm a Liberal Democrat.
Oh, okay. It's a very astute. It's a very astute analysis and quite sympathetic to the Conservatives as well, and very informed.
It's because I know a lot of Conservatives.
Really?
I'm a Liberal Democrat in a part of the world that probably isn't going to vote Liberal Democrat anytime soon.
Yes.
But I look at them thinking they have managed this reinvention multiple times before, and they've gone mad. They've chosen the people that are damaging to the country, but there are still people within the Conservative Party
really good
and younger
point.
people.
I hear you. Yeah, don't go all politician on me by saying the same things again in a slightly different order. You've made some excellent points. I've really enjoyed listening to you, Rob. Thank you. And I mean, the only challenge to that perhaps would be the danger of thinking that we are, that normal rules apply, although step back far enough from the fray and the reintroduction of normal rules probably becomes more pertinent. The madness of the moment suggests that traditional rules, traditional tides no longer apply, but step back far enough, and he's probably right, isn't he? He's probably right. Maybe a massive recalibration, rebranding, reinvention, but it would be that or oblivion. I just want to play a little bit of Keir Starmer speaking to the TUC in Brighton earlier today because it's quite a big deal when the Labour leader addresses the TUC, especially when, as seems likely, that he is the sort of leader of a government in waiting.
Britain knows exactly where the Tories stand. They can dance around a U-turn. They can sack this Chancellor or the Prime Minister. But the damage is done, and they did it. They crashed the British economy. And for what? To show they were on the side of the richest 1%. A crisis made in Downing Street without a democratic mandate, paid for by working people in higher bills, higher rents, and higher mortgages. This is who they are. These are their true colours. Never again can Britain take seriously their claim to be a party of aspiration or sound money. But Congress, last night in Parliament, even by their standards, a new chaotic low. All the failures of the past 12 years have now come to the boil. The victims of crime who can't get justice. People dying because ambulances can't get there in time. Millions going without food or heating. And none of it can drum into the Tories the idea that our country must come first. They lack the basic patriotic duty to keep the British people out of their own pathetic squabbles. And it's wrecked the finances of our country and for millions of people. This cannot continue. Britain deserves better. Britain cannot afford the chaos of the Conservatives anymore. We need a general election now.
It's 11:46.
LBC. Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio and on Global Player.
Transport Secretary and Conservative MP Anne-Marie Trevelyan. To those who say this is a government now that's out of ideas, it's running out of personnel, it really should be out of office, how would you respond?
I would disagree. We're certainly not out of ideas, and we are in office because we were elected and our Prime Minister is leading us to deliver some really important programme of policies to help with growth.
How long has Liz Truss got? Will she be Prime Minister on Monday?
Yes.
Will she be Prime Minister for the next general election?
I think that's going to be the case. We want to get to 2024. We have a big agenda to deliver.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
With Motorway, where
BC,
dealers compete
with
to
James
give you
O'Brien.
their best price for your car.
11:51 is the
LBC.
time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we move now to one regime in mortal peril to another, albeit that the stakes are considerably higher in Iran than they are in Westminster. I'm joined by Omid Jalili, the actor and comedian, who is, of course, of Persian extraction. So you will have been watching these events even more closely than the rest of us, Omid. What is different about this uprising compared to previous ones?
That's a great question, because whenever there were uprisings before, there were leaders, and this regime is very good at suppressing. They put the leaders in under house arrest and just massacre a lot of people. Everyone goes quiet, and you get on with life because it's easier just to stay quiet. Here it's different. Whenever they have forced confessions, people just go on and do forced confessions, and they have to act really well. So they really prepare, and they're very convincing. Elnaz Rekabi was in Seoul recently for the mountain climbing, and she didn't wear a hijab, and she became a hero. She was given a hero's welcome, and then apparently her passport was confiscated, her phone was confiscated, and now she has made a retraction saying it was basically a wardrobe malfunction.
It fell off.
It fell off or something, yeah. And when she was giving a speech to the cameras, you can tell she's even sending a message with her eyes. Her eyes are dead, and she's just, if you listen to the Persian, she goes, yes. She's very clearly sending a message to Iranians, this is a forced confession. So what we had now is the women are not scared. Nikah Shah Karami was a 16-year-old girl who was beaten and killed, and the body was given to the parents. And the mother was then, can you imagine having your daughter killed? And then you want your mother, the mother is asked to go on state television to make a forced confession, to say that the Basiji or the moral police had nothing to do with it. And she refused. And then they threatened to burn her. And then she said something that has become like a motto and a slogan. She just said, you can't burn women made of fire.
Wow.
And it shut them up. And I think this is what's different is you don't mess with women in general, but Iranian women, we call them Shirazan, which means lion ladies. And you don't mess with them. And there's so many videos, people say, you do not mess with Iran. That's it. This is it for you now. People saying, this is it. Once you've annoyed the women, that is such a hornet's nest that the regime's days are numbered.
That's incredible. Because it began, of course, with the murder of Mahsa Amini,
yes, who was wearing a hijab, and she was a Kurdish woman who'd just come to Tehran on a day trip, and she apparently wasn't wearing it right, wasn't tight enough, and she was showing 2 inches of her hair, and was going to be taken away for what's called, like a driver awareness course. It's like a hijab awareness course, and she was resisting, saying, "I'm wearing my hijab. What's the problem? What are you doing?" And she was beaten viciously and died. And this was the powder keg moment that I think Iranians have been waiting for a moment like that, where basically the women stood up and said, you do not do this. And I kind of feel, because there's no leader, and the women are saying we don't need a leader, because if there is a leader, then you'll do what you did last time. This is a conscious, organic movement which has spread all across all strata of society, that they're killing children as young as 12 and 7 now, because even the children are kind of refusing. There was a girl called Asra Panahi who just refused to sing a pro-regime song, and she was beaten and she died. So that's it's adding fuel to the fire.
Yeah, so it's every time they cut someone down, 10 more people step forward to replace her. And so Optimism's a scary thing, though, isn't it? You know that line about hope and despair. You can deal with the despair. It's the hope that gets you every time, isn't it?
It is. But I am hopeful, and I think because the outrage that is coming out now, it's very difficult to know because the internet's cut. So we've been asked to be through Elon Musk's Starlight thing. That a couple of videos are coming out, and they're begging us to be a voice, being their voice. So a lot of us outside of Iran are doing our best we're gleaning what's going on, and we can just amplify their voices. But I do feel that the information we're getting is so hopeful. For example, the military have now come out and saying the moral police are nothing to do with us. And there's a great video of someone being beaten, and he's shouting at them. He goes, "Dude, are you speaking Arabic?" Because of course it's difficult. And they're now recruiting ISIS fighters in Iran to suppress the Iranian people. So the military have come out saying this is not us.
Right.
We are refusing.
This is the religious police.
There is the religious police. We have this thing called the moral police, who's such downers. They go around. Like they'll stop you, James. He goes, "Why have you cut your beard like this? You haven't cut. You can keep your beard like that, but you should shave the bottom bit there because it'll hurt your Adam's apple." They go around telling people how to live, and this is why it's become more than just the major feminist movement on the planet. This is for all people to live a free life.
Right.
There are Muslims I know who are absolutely outraged, saying, "Who are these people telling people how they can live their lives? You should be free to be a Christian or a Muslim, or in my case a Baha'i, who are very much a suppressed minority. Who are you to tell us how to live? Well, how are you telling Muslims how to be a proper Muslim?"
I have more questions for you. I mentioned at the beginning that the situation in Iran puts the internecine warfare in Westminster at the moment somewhat in the shade and reminds us of what really matters. But I should tell you that Graham Brady has just gone into Downing Street, the chair of the 1922 committee. The Prime Minister's spokesman said at the beginning of lobby this morning, so about half an hour or so ago, that there were no plans for the Prime Minister to meet Graham Brady. She is now meeting Graham Brady.
That's just so funny because I was on stage the other night and people said, what's going on in Iran? And I said, and I hadn't finished my thought and they started laughing. I said, can you imagine living in a country where a leader is forced on you and you can't even vote for them? And this woofer came up, what?
Yeah, so it's the ability to find the comedy in everything. It's a rare gift. What happens next? I understand the escalation. I understand the organic nature of it. I understand how the absence of a pinnacle for the pyramid makes it impossible for the regime to behave in a traditional way. But what would a tipping point be? What would the...
I think the tipping point is definitely international intervention. Right. I know that when I was on Peston last night, I was saying that Britain is the only country that really hasn't made a statement on the Islamic regime. James Cleverly, as Foreign Secretary, God bless him, has put out a statement saying we sanction the morality police. But that's like, I'll give you a different analogy. It's a bit like a bloke with a machete going around killing people. Then you stop him and then you sanction the machete.
Got you.
So it doesn't make sense. You have to, like the European Parliament have all called out the Islamic regime and they need to be held accountable for this. We need to put pressure on them. They do listen to pressure. And once you have that, in the same way we're putting sanctions on Russia. And sadly, I think Iran are not going to make the World Cup now because they've sent drones and they've sent missiles supporting Russia. And if you do that, then there will be sporting sanctions. So the game I was looking forward to all my life, there's never been an England v Iran game. That, sadly, is probably not going to happen. So I think we need international pressure. And, there will be a time, James, in the future, not now, but when there's a recalcitrant government who just has continued to ignore human rights standards and are abusing people, there will be a time where all the countries of the world stand up and liquidate that government. And we didn't do it with Putin. We're not doing it with the Islamic Republic of Iran. We're not doing that. And we're pussyfooting around because we're still in business with these people.
So the pressure has to come from outside. You can't see it bubbling over inside.
Yes, I can see that as well, because the women are saying
this is what intrigues me. The idea of just the streets being engulfed with so many people that the regime is carried out kicking and screaming.
There is a
prospect of that?
Yeah, the women have said, leave it to us. I do a joke about how women always find things.
It is 5 minutes after 12 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. My apologies if you were tuning in for Mystery Hour, but the combination of the publication of the findings, the conclusions of the largest inquiry ever into child sexual abuse in this country, which is taking place now. The embargo on this ended at 12 noon. We're expecting to speak to Baroness J, who chaired proceedings shortly. And the fact that Graham Brady, the chair of the 1922 committee, has gone into Downing Street in circumstances that most observers are suggesting or even perhaps reporting probably means that Liz Truss has now run out of road. If Graham Brady is in receipt of sufficient letters of no confidence, then he will go and talk to her and tell her that her position has become unsustainable. Some key findings from this inquiry into child sexual abuse is mandatory reporting is one of the major recommendations that Professor Jay, who chaired the inquiry, has made. This is fascinating, something we've covered quite a lot on this programme. The idea that anyone who works with children and does not report child sexual abuse should themselves be prosecuted. This is a 7-year inquiry, and this is one of the key recommendations that comes from its concluding report. It's also called The Nature and Scale of Abuse in England and Wales, Horrific and Deeply Disturbing, with children regularly threatened, beaten and humiliated. Professor Alexis Jay has described it as an epidemic that leaves thousands of victims in its poisonous wake. We heard time and time again how allegations of abuse were ignored, victims were blamed, and institutions prioritised their reputations over the protection of children, she said. We cannot simply file it away and consider it a historical aberration when so much of what we learned suggests it is an ever-growing problem exacerbated by the current and future threat of the internet. It was set up, of course, in the wake of the Jimmy Savile scandal by the then Home Secretary, Theresa May. Had a broad remit to investigate historical allegations of child abuse dating back to the 1950s, as well as claims that authorities, including the police, failed to properly investigate these allegations. And we will, as I say, be having a much closer look at what this report has concluded in the course of the next hour. We'll also speak to Tom Perry, who, of course, founded Mandate Now and has been calling for precisely this recommendation for much of his life. So his views on it, and indeed his explanation to the uninitiated of precisely what it involves, will be particularly welcome. But we juggle at the same time, of course, with the shenanigans in Downing Street and with the very real possibility that the prime ministerial reign, the super short reign of Liz Truss is well, it looks like it may be nearing the end. I mean, listen, I'm waiting for Theo Usherwood to actually run back from Downing Street. If you see greased lightning making its way up the Mall at the moment, that will be Theo Usherwood, like Speedy Gonzales rushing through central London. But I mean, there is no other explanation for why, having stressed that there were no plans for Truss to meet Graham Brady today, Truss would now be meeting Graham Brady. And this is the glass of scotch and metaphorical revolver moment. This is where he says you have completely lost the support of the party. It's why the shambles that occurred last night was so significant. It's why the words of Sir Charles Walker were so pertinent, because it spoke of a party in more than disarray. It spoke of a party in mortal peril, really, and whether a change of leader can fix anything or reverse this decline, only time will tell. But as we've been talking about for much of the last hour of the programme, I don't think it's guaranteed. I don't think a new leader would automatically bring about some sort of revitalisation or resurrection. The problems seem to me to be existential and to run extremely deep. 9 minutes after 12. So we'll try and juggle both of those issues in the course of the next hour, which means that there will be, understandably, I'm sure you'll agree, there will be no mystery hour. The number you need to join in the conversation about the Conservative Party, of course, is 0345 6060 973. And the question I would ask you, again, very simply, is how do they come back from this, especially if they are about to lose yet another leader? How do they come back from this? I mean, it'd be the third leader essentially defenestrated by their own MPs in almost as many years. You go back to 2019 when it happened to May, and then 2022 when it happened to Johnson. So it would be 3 years. It would be 3 defenestrations in 3 years. Cameron, of course, walked the plank of his own volition after his ludicrous referendum blew up in his face. 10 minutes after 12 is the time. How do the Conservatives come back from this? Are they in some form of existential decline? You know, this country is in a state. Quite a few of you making this point, actually, but this is probably pithiest from AG. You know, this country is in a state when Mystery Hour is cancelled on the Mr. James O.B. show. Roddy's in Glasgow. Roddy, if you can remember, because it was a while ago, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, what made me pick up the phone earlier, James, was thinking about Johnson and his life extension that would have been had COVID not occurred.
Yes,
I think he would have been able to weave his Brexit magic with not only with the Tory faithful, but with the wider population who voted for Brexit. And that might have extended for another 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah.
I think eventually it would have come undone. But I think
it's always going to come undone. The only question was when, wasn't it? And
Correct.
Johnson, more than anybody, possessed the diabolical skill set necessary to keep reality at bay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, he's the only glue that held it together. It's now exposed for what it is, and I think even a lot of people who voted Brexit but
none of the Tories are going to do this. So, I've said a few times that they're one, possibly 2 leaders away from where you are now, from actually acknowledging. I mean, look, there's one report today. UK-EU trade is down 16% on where it would be if we were still in the European Union. GDP, according to the OBR, is already down 4%. It's a bigger hit to the British economy than COVID. So you know that, I know that. Everybody paying attention or vaguely sensible knows that. The Conservative Party is still in deep denial about it.
Well, I think they're moving in that direction. I think
do you?
Braverman and Truss. Braverman Truss indicates that the argument that we need more immigration to create growth, I think, is beginning to take root. And I think Theo's
got more news for us on that precise topic in a moment, actually. But that's not
if you need to.
That's not an admission that Brexit was a mistake. That's simply an admission that we need more immigration, but it will be controlled this time or something.
But they've got to feed it in. Like, they changed the budget. Everything changed. I hope. Ironically, I'm not a Tory voter, far from it.
Sure.
But in a way, I would quite like to see Hunt get his whatever he proposes on 31st of October, assuming it looks after all working people and pensioners, to get that through Parliament on the books, and therefore whatever happens politically over the next 6 months, the markets and the population know that they are slightly securer than where they were than if she fell tomorrow, because that would be truly chaos, and God knows what the markets would do in reaction to that.
You make many excellent points. Thank you, Roddy. It was worth the wait. Good things come to those who wait. And Theo Usher, I just had reports of a meteorological phenomenon on the Mall. Apparently you were moving so fast the pavement has scorch marks. Whitehall, I beg your pardon. The pavement has scorch marks on it.
Roadrunner.
Here you
racing to bring news. Now, when I went into the daily briefing with the Prime Minister's spokesman, I was told, along with others, that there were no plans at the moment for Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1922 committee. This is at 11:30 for a meeting between Sir Graham Brady and the Prime Minister, Liz Truss. So we're sitting there asking questions of the Prime Minister's spokesman. And then it's revealed that Sir Graham Brady has walked into number 10 to meet Liz Truss, the Prime Minister. We understand, of course, that when the moment comes that Liz Truss is going to be told that she has to go, it will come from Sir Graham Brady. That's what we understand, because it is the discontent on the backbenchers, especially after what happened over the last, yesterday, but for the last month, really. So it is a significant meeting. Is it the meeting she is told where she is told to pack her bags and leave number 10? We'll get news
What
shortly.
else could it be, realistically?
This is where I think it might land. And this is from speaking to MPs, and this is where my hunch is. I would imagine, and I may be wrong on this, but I imagine that what we may get suddenly by the end of today, going into tomorrow, a timetable for her departure.
Right.
So, and what that would look like is the focus on the medium-term fiscal statement to steady the markets. October the 31st statement. That's 11 days away, where you will get decisions made about public spending around benefits, pensions, pan-Whitehall spending, whether it includes defence, the NHS and health, the full gamut.
And of course, that's designed to steady markets. And this is the thinking from backbench MPs, some backbench MPs, is that if you get rid of the Prime Minister in the interim and then you have to appoint a new Prime Minister, that medium-term fiscal statement would inevitably have to be pushed. So I think what the thinking is that Liz Truss remains in post to get that over the line, or at least there's an agreement to get that over the line in order to steady the markets and ensure that we don't have spiralling mortgage costs again. And then after October the 31st, and whether that timetable is set now or in the next day or two, Liz Truss would go to see the Queen and hand in her resignation, and their successor would be appointed.
Appointed?
Within the Conservative Party. I mean, they're not going to put it back to the membership. I can't. I mean, it would be.
But they're not required to. If more than one hat is in the ring.
No, because
sure?
Because the 1922 executive can change the rules.
So it would just say we're not giving it.
And it's the executive. Yeah. So it's the executive can change the rules.
Okay.
And that's led by Sir Graham Brady.
And then there'd be
team.
no need for hustings or anything like that.
No need for hustings.
Sorted out.
They can't go back. There's no way they can go back to the membership, having spent more than 6 weeks trying to pick a new leader. And then
how much do we read into the length of this meeting? I know that I'm asking you to sort of knit clouds.
I think that the fact that the Prime Minister's spokesman wasn't able to tell us about the meeting when we asked him initially, and then suddenly it gets thrown on us, I think it should be seen as significant in that respect. But I'm not necessarily sure that this is the meeting where Liz Truss...
No, best case scenario for Liz Truss fans is that they come out with a timetable for her departure. There's no prospect that this does not entail her departure.
No, she's gone. And we were speaking earlier. And
imagine if you'd placed a large bet at 7-1 last week on her going before Christmas. 7-1 it was. Anyone who took my advice on that, I want 15%.
Yes, okay. You'd be, I mean, if you'd place, say, I don't know, £1,000, then that's quite a lot of money, James.
It is, isn't it?
But there's no way back from here, and from speaking to those.
And will we know immediately?
No, I'd imagine in the there would be a statement announced, and
in the next 40 minutes. Just was wondering whether I've made a mistake in cancelling Mystery Hour.
I don't know whether. I don't think you made a mistake in cancelling Mystery Hour. I don't know whether we'll.
Also,
get
we've
that.
got a king, not a queen. Lots of people are pointing.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Bless him.
I'm really sorry. King Charles III. I'm so sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine.
Sorry.
Just my listeners are paying more attention than I am. My listeners are paying more attention than I am.
They'll go to see His Majesty. Yes. I stand corrected.
Exactly
and profuse apologies to His Majesty. And then and of course we know there are. He would accept her resignation.
How long has she been Prime Minister?
She has been Prime Minister since September the 6th.
That's going to be a record, is it? What's the shortest ever? Did someone?
I'm not sure. I'd need to look it up.
Okay. Don't leave me, will you? I think you should stick around just in case. And we also need to report, of course, on this independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, which has today published its concluding report requiring urgent action to ensure children are better protected in the future than they have been in the past and are, it should be said, in the present. It's 22 minutes after 11. Craig writes, today's show is fabulous, James, and I did indeed place a bet on Truss leaving sometime in 2022. 15%, please, Craig, if you placed that bet on my recommendation when the odds were 7 or 8-1 just last week. I'm watching Adore. It's not exactly David Dimbleby territory, is it? By the way, if you haven't listened to my interview with David Dimbleby on Full Disclosure, I heartily recommend it. And we got overtaken by events, so I haven't had the chance to tell you who was on this week's Full Disclosure, which we should probably have played a clip out of that at some point. It's time for another one tomorrow. But Amanda Owen, the Yorkshire shepherdess, absolutely fascinating woman. I can't remember the last time a Full Disclosure interview took me so much by surprise. I knew roughly what to expect, but that hour was just quite magical, actually. I really hope you get the chance to listen to it. I think the Duke of Wellington, Arthur Wellesley, someone's telling me it was 23 days, Alex. My producer today, Alex, is fascinated by pub quiz politics, the matters of trivia, whether or not Liz Truss will turn out to be the shortest serving Prime Minister of all time. I think George Canning did 118 days, so she's going to beat him. Isn't she? She's going to be shorter than him. But if that's true about one of the Dukes of Wellington having a go for the best part of 3 weeks, then I think his record is probably safe. Now, do you want to know something exciting? I'm just looking through the glass now. Theo Ashwood, LBC's political editor, were talking off-air in pretty much the same way that we talk on air, actually. On days like today, there's no sort of gossiping or changing of the subject. We continue to mull what is likely to happen next, and what is likely to happen next is that Liz Truss's premiership is now over, but the method of its final conclusion is yet to be confirmed. And Theo's phone rang in the studio, on silent, of course. The man's a professional. And he looked at it and he went, "Oh, crikey, I think I've got a story." And then he stepped out of the studio to speak to his top source live while we were in the last break, and he's just he's coming back into the studio now. So this could be the mother of all anticlimaxes.
No, it is.
Oh, is it?
Well, I was really hoping.
But you were very excited. I've never seen you jump in the air like that. What was it?
What I was hoping was the MP who rang me was going to go on the record. However, given the situation we're in,
12:23, not 11:23. I got the time wrong. You got the monarch wrong.
It's a professional job, this, isn't it? Yes. But given the situation we're in, I'm not sure the MP who rang me actually felt it was necessary to go on the record, sure, given how close we are to the end. But just simply saying to me that, and this is a respected MP, I should add. That's why I thought it would be more of a story. Yes. But they're saying to me, the Prime Minister's got to be gone by the end of the day, and that her position is totally untenable.
Gone, or announced the departure for going gone. Gone. Who takes over? I mean, she can't go.
Well,
who takes over? Therese Coffey?
Good question. Good question. I think what and things are moving very quickly, and I'm just trying to navigate this. I think, given how speedily Grant Shapps got the Home Secretary job, you would wonder whether the fact that he's in Cabinet, Jeremy Hunt's now the Chancellor, whether there could... I personally still think they'll go long to October the 31st.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yes, but their letter's going in right now with Sir Graham Brady in number 10.
So a threshold has clearly been breached.
Yes.
There's some talk yesterday it might be a third of all MPs. Obviously, if it hits a half, she's utterly done for.
And I'm not sure from reading the runes that actually... Everything is sort of predicated when you talk about the 1922 committee on Boris Johnson, the fact he literally had to be dragged kicking and screaming out of number 10 Downing Street. And you ended up in those bizarre scenes, only in July, with his aides coming out and giving these fantastical briefings on the steps of number 10, that why he should stay. But I'm not sure Liz Truss is necessarily going to be forced out of Downing Street in quite... in the same way. I think, given there'll be a threshold that's been crossed and should be told to go.
Your phone just buzzed again.
I'm not sure I know this person. Let me check it.
So right back, say new phone. Who dis?
Sorry, I'm just trying to. No, it's not. It's not. It's a joke. Sorry.
26.
I don't know. Somebody.
27 minutes after 12. We'll cross live to Charlotte Lynch after. We'll go after the past news. We can't squeeze that into the remaining 2 minutes of this segment of the programme. So Charlotte Lynch has been looking at the full report in the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, and will bring us some of those key points after the past news. And then at 12:45 I'll be speaking to Professor Alexis Jay, who has of course conducted this inquiry. In the meantime, we are essentially watching a door, aren't we?
Yes, we're watching a door. And I'm just watching my phone.
I mean, is anyone going to come out of the door, do you think? I mean,
well, so Graham Brady went in the back door. Whether he then sort of magically appears out the front door, we don't know yet. But we would expect some sort of Graham Brady to leave, and then we would expect something either from Sir Graham Brady himself as the chairman of the 1922 committee, or if Liz Truss actually decides, having heard the advice of Sir Graham Brady, and we have to obviously preface that Sir Graham Brady gives her the advice that she has to go, then we would expect something obviously to be announced from the Prime Minister in terms of a statement. And as I said, from speaking to people, I get the impression that actually that's leaning more towards, they'd want to see a timetable to ensure that in terms of the volatility we've seen in the financial markets, that actually that is... that moves are made to ensure...
Therese Coffey's just gone into the back door as well.
Therese Coffey is the Deputy Prime Minister. That's
maybe she's got some pills.
So
she was posting last week about knocking out antibiotics to her mates. Maybe Liz Truss needs some medical help at this point in proceedings.
So obviously Theresa Coffey, as the Deputy Prime Minister, you would think should be part of the conversation if there were to be a transition.
To whom?
That's still an unanswered question, and that's why Tory MPs, we were talking earlier in the week, were kind of going, "Oh, do we go to Theresa May to sort us out?" And it was it's a slightly farcical situation.
So it's definitely game over. It's just a question of how, as you've discussed. The Prime Minister's deputy and closest ally, Theresa Coffey, has gone into the back of number 10 Downing Street. It's slightly unfortunate phraseology from Beth Rubke at Sky News there. It makes it sound like she's crashed her car, doesn't it? It's gone into the back of 10 Downing Street. The back door, we should stress. And Graham Brady, the chair of the 22 committee, is already in there, almost certainly delivering the final dispatch to... be careful what you wish for, Liz Truss?
Yes, I'm just trying to count the days. It's the 20th, 6th, so that's 14
while Lottie
plus
Morley
6.
brings us the very latest headlines.
The Prime Minister is meeting with the chair of the 1922 committee as unrest within the Conservative Party grows. There are now 14 MPs who have publicly called for Liz Truss to step down, with reports of many more. Failing to report allegations of child sexual abuse could become a criminal offence. The recommendation was included in the findings of a 7-year-long inquiry into child abuse in England and Wales. And a man has been charged with the murder of a 3-week-old boy in Birmingham. The baby died in Spark Hill on Tuesday. 29-year-old Qadis Mohammed also faces charges of assault and wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. LBC weather: cloudy with heavy spells of rain across much of Scotland and northern and eastern England. Brighter over Northern Ireland, Wales and southwest England, with a high of 18 degrees.
This is LBC.
At Laser Clinics UK, we're bringing you the future of beauty. We offer state-of-the-art laser hair removal for every skin tone and type. Ditch the razor, leave behind painful, pricey waxing, make the switch for long-lasting, smooth results. Our Big Beauty sale is on now. 50% off all laser hair removal packages. Brazilian and underarms only £24.50 per session. Go to laserclinics.co.uk for T's and C's and to book and buy online. Laser Clinics UK.
Our pledge is to put more money in the public's pocket.
What about my household bills?
Feeling that cost of living crunch? Lebara are here to help. 3 gigabytes of data, EU roaming included, and no annual price rises, all for just £5 a month. Lebara, more for less. Change or cancel anytime. Rated excellent on Trustpilot. Buy now at lebara.co.uk. Terms apply.
Life is about sharing those magical moments, and food shouldn't be any different. For over 35 years, Marouche has been perfecting this experience with their delicious food, warm hospitality, and live entertainment. Authentic Lebanese cuisine made the traditional way. Marouche, your family restaurant. Book now at marouche.com.
At Lidl, we're big on British, because all our everyday range of fresh milk, butter and eggs is British. That's as British as a buttery crumpet in a builder's brew and taking forever to hang up the phone. Bye, cheers, bye then. Yep, that British. Now that's big on quality and always Lidl on price. Excludes special promotions. Subject to availability, selected stores excludes NI.
Paint your walls a shade that'll get your neighbours staring. At Wickes, get Dulux Standard 2.5 litre coloured emulsion was £20, now £15. Be house proud with Wickes. Terms apply.
Now that the holiday season is over, many timeshare owners are facing a winter of expensive upkeep. With rising inflation, now more than ever, we need to look after our money. If you own a timeshare in Spain or the Canaries and bought it after 5th of January 1999, you may have been missold. mytimeshareclaim.co.uk could help you exit your contract and receive substantial compensation. To find out more, text ASSIST to 78900. That's ASSIST to 78900 today.
Maybe your stamps are on the table next to the birthday card you forgot to send. Or in that random drawer full of pens, pennies and paper clips. Or stuck to your fridge behind a year-old to-do list and a magnet from Malaga. Or maybe, just maybe, they're neatly placed in a completely sensible spot. After the 31st of January 2023, regular stamps without a barcode will no longer be valid. So if you know where your old ones are, use them up or swap them. For more info, visit royalmail.com/barcoded stamps.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:33 is the time. Charlotte Lynch has been looking through the report, the conclusions of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, which was published moments ago. Charlotte got hold of it a little earlier, but the embargo was only lifted at 12 noon today. So it will be early impressions, Charlotte, that you can share with us.
Yes, James. Well, this is the result of a 7-year inquiry that's looked at more than 2.5 million pieces of evidence and spoken to more than 7,000 victims of abuse. And time again, with every aspect it looked at, repeated failures were exposed by adults in positions of trust who failed to report that children were being sexually abused or signs of it, whether it be in schools, in social services and care, within the church, and indeed in Westminster too. That investigation released in February 2020, which found that at times whips officers and the police had showed deference towards people of public prominence. But that has been exposed throughout this inquiry. People often turning a blind eye and covering up allegations of abuse to protect the reputations of their institutions. And the overarching recommendation of this inquiry now, of which it has made 20, but the main overarching recommendation is that it should be mandatory for people in positions of trust to report it, and it should be a criminal offence if they don't. Now, the inquiry's chair, Alexis Jay, I know you'll be speaking to her a little later on, but she said urgent action is required to protect children across England and Wales. It found many institutions have historically inadequate measures that fail to safeguard them from abuse that happened and continues to happen in schools, care homes and in religious settings. Now, the most common place they found for this dreadful abuse to occur is in the family home, but 36% of those 7,300 victims they spoke to said abuse happened somewhere else in an institution, and schools were the most frequently reported location. And actually, in this report, several examples were given from victims, which, as you can imagine, makes incredibly difficult reading. But again, as I was flicking through almost all of them that I was reading, so many said that they felt they had been let down by everyone and everything, by people who were supposed to protect them. In fact, one victim even said that he was told he was tarnishing the reputation of his Muslim religion. He shouldn't say anything. People were often ignored, not believed, or even just told to shut up, because schools, councils and other institutions wanted to protect their own reputations. Now, the government has been urged to create what they're calling a child protection authority to ensure that this is being reported, acted upon and prevented, because what they've found is there is a significant lack of leadership when it comes to this across the police, across healthcare, across schools. There's no kind of one body that brings it all together and investigates it and works to prevent it. So they want a child protection authority to be urgently set up in England and another one in Wales. And what was also a major factor of this report was the role of social media and websites. Of course, they want more to be done on that front. They want social media and web giants to take more responsibility for their role and put more screening measures in place, and also more measures for age verification checks for users. They say the online safety bill has taken too long to be enacted by the government and must be urgently progressed, and the government must urgently take action on those factors too. So I know Alexis J will be giving you more detail about their findings a little later in the programme, but really this overarching recommendation, making it a criminal offence to turn a blind eye, has been done for so long.
So the end of the inquiry, but the beginning of a process of improvement that no doubt Professor J will be able to, as Charlotte says, tell us more about shortly. All being well. I mean, she's incredibly busy, obviously, and we move on sixpences on this programme, although at the door is opening at Downing Street, but it's just someone coming out with a bag. 38 minutes after 12 is the time. Should we talk about some other political matters that are unfolding before us, which would garner rather more attention in normal circumstances? Take your pick, Boris Johnson or Nadine Dorries?
Let's start with the Nadine Dorries story, which has just come out. This is a report from the Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee, and it relates to a documentary series broadcast on Channel 4 in 2010, Tower Block of Commons. Now, Nadine Dorries, of course, then Culture Secretary this year, and 4 other MPs participated in this documentary, which placed on a housing estate in South Acton in West London. And she made a number of claims before the Select Committee in May of this year. She said, the parents of some of the boys in that programme contacted me and came here to have lunch to tell me that the boys were in acting school. They were not really living in a flat. They were not real. They were actually actors. If you remember, there was a pharmacist I went to see who prepared food. She was also a paid actor as well. Now, Channel 4, in response to those allegations, asked Love Productions, which produced the show, to investigate Nadine Dorries' claims. They couldn't find any evidence that ordinary members of the public had interactions with the Secretary of State. And now Julian Knight, who's chairman of the Select Committee back in July, asked Nadine Dorries to back up her claims, but of course saying the committee needs to ensure that those who give evidence before it do so with the intent of providing the truth as far as they know it. The ministerial code counts in committee exactly in the same manner as it does in the House of Commons, and the code is quite clear that a minister should provide information should a minister provide information that is not correct, they should, at the earliest opportunity, correct the record. However, has the record been corrected? No, it hasn't. And of course, Nadine Dorries has been subject to criticism as a result by Julian Knight, the chairman of the committee. And I should just give you his quote now. We can recognise that those giving evidence will occasionally make mistakes, but it is vitally important for the integrity of parliamentary scrutiny that they are then corrected. We are disappointed that despite being provided with several opportunities to reconsider her position, the former Secretary of State failed to countenance that her recollections may have been flawed. People will be able to draw...
That's very generous. Her recollections may have been flawed.
People will be able to draw their own conclusions.
But she's under parliamentary privilege, otherwise Channel 4 would be able to sue her, wouldn't they? As would I, of course, when she lied about me in Select Committee on several occasions, as was pointed out by the SNP MP John Nicholson.
Yes. Yeah.
Should get my own report, frankly.
People will be able to draw their own conclusions about the contrast between her claims and subsequent correspondence with the committee and Channel 4's thorough investigation. Talking of committees, would you like to know about details I've discovered this morning about the Privileges Committee into Partygate?
Oh, yes, please.
Now, do you remember when Dominic Cummings? This is a genuine question.
Yeah,
he
funny
gave the
fella,
committee.
wore a hat.
He gave that evidence, and you basically took it live. You dedicated your whole show.
I did. Yes.
When the Privileges Committee sits in November, do you know how long it's going to be sitting for?
No.
It's going to be sitting for 4 hours a day, for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, for 3 days a week. And this is in a committee for 3 weeks.
Just to examine...
3 weeks.
Well, it's quite a big deal if a Prime Minister
Apparently there are just so many witnesses who want to come forward with detailed evidence as to whether Boris Johnson knowingly misled Parliament when he said that there were no parties.
Oh, this is big. Because why would they want to come? But they're not coming forward to back him up, are they?
So you're going to end up in this situation where the Privileges Committee, live on camera...
Yeah.
is going to be interviewing people, probably a 10 o'clock start time, actually.
Yeah.
They're not like those who avoid the James O'Brien show.
No, the select committees don't.
They'll be taking
So we could take some of it live every day.
If you wanted to. I don't know, you might want to. But if you wanted to. But it's the reason that this was being spoken about to me was, of course, to anybody who might, in the Conservative Party, you might think that Boris Johnson is the answer, suddenly starts work, and then you've got 4 hours a day for 3 days a week for 3 weeks of evidence about why...
A long queue of people describing his partying.
WhatsApp messages, emails, photographs,
all
potentially
designed. So the inquiry
mix.
is when he said that he hadn't been to any party, when he said there weren't any parties, and then he said, well, actually there were parties, but I didn't go to any. And then he said, well, actually there were parties and I did go to them, but I didn't realise they were parties.
To what's in Parliament.
They'll be able to pin down whether or not he has a leg to stand on.
No,
when he claimed he didn't realise he was misleading Parliament when he misled Parliament.
Yeah, because it's about knowingly misleading Parliament. So they'll be looking at evidence to support any claims that when he made the statements that he made, he actually knew the truth to be different because he's received the WhatsApp messages, the photographs, the emails and so forth.
I remember when the Daily Mail spent 10 days, was it, trying to make a big fuss about Keir Starmer's utterly blameless behaviour over curries and beers. Still watching the door.
Still watching the door.
Do you think they're waiting for Sheila? As soon as Sheila comes on air, the door will open and they'll make a flipping announcement. I never get to announce the end of Prime Ministerial. Here she is. She is Sheila Fogarty, walking like an Egyptian. Is that it? I mean,
just waiting, looking at the door.
I suppose if you're just joining us, then I should tell you that the Prime Minister, Theresa May, Prime Minister Liz Truss is in a meeting with the chair of the 1922 committee. Theo Usherwood was at the lobby briefing earlier with the Prime Minister's official spokesman, who was asked two questions, among others, which were, are there any plans for the Prime Minister to meet with Graham Brady today?
That was 11:30.
11:30, yes, so just over an hour ago. What was the answer to that question?
No plans for the Prime Minister to meet Sir Graham Brady.
And also, I believe, will Liz Truss be leading the Conservatives into the next general election? To which the reply was...
I think it was the same as Anne-Marie Trevelyan when she said, I think... the Prime Minister will be leading the Conservative government into the next election. Nothing is certain.
Thank you, Theo. My whole life, someone who's asked me to protect their anonymity has been totally taken over by historic abuse as a 5-year-old. I feel utterly disgusted and ashamed that this story isn't going to be in the media as much as it should be, and all because our government cannot act like grown-ups for 2 minutes. I took part in the inquiry and I am pleased that the report has come to the conclusions that it has come to. More coverage should be given to this report, but instead the news will be taken over by adults behaving like imbeciles. I'll do my best to redress some of that in the coming days. I promise. It's 12:45.
Coming up at 1 on LBC, Sheila Fogarty.
A little dictator without a mandate, appalling, unforgivable, inexcusable. Liz Truss's annual appraisal from her colleagues enters dismissal.
BC. Sheila Fogarty.
12:49 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the message I read out a moment ago from someone who asked to remain anonymous, expressing concern that some of the attention that should be paid to the conclusion of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse will perhaps be distracted or turned instead to the continuing shenanigans in Downing Street. I meant what I said. I'll do my level best to redress some of that balance in the coming days, weeks, even months. And I'm joined now by Professor Alexis Jay, who has chaired the inquiry. Alexis, thank you for your time. I wonder, perhaps we could begin months from now, or even a year or two from now. What changes are you most keen to see in the status quo?
Well, of course, we want to see all of our recommendations implemented as quickly as possible. And we do realise that some of them inevitably will take a little longer than others. But ideally, we want them to be implemented because we believe this is the best possible way that we can protect children better in the future.
What are the? I mean, I'm trying to phrase this question sensitively, but the ones that you want acted on first, the ones that are most urgent.
Well, the problem with the question is that, in a sense,
They're all urgent.
A package. Yes, I'm sorry to say that, James, but
of course.
It's a package of recommendations which fit together. Now, we talked of three very important ones that formed the centrepiece, as I'm sure you know, which were about mandatory reporting, redress, a scheme of redress, and finally the creation of child protection authorities for England and for Wales.
You have a background in social work yourself in Scotland. How shocked were you in the course of this inquiry to discover the depth of the problems?
I was shocked at the depth and the breadth of the problems. Although, needless to say, it was not the first time I had conducted any investigations out of Scotland. Of
course. On a personal level, it must have been quite harrowing, this inquiry. It's gone on for years. It's involved testimony that, I mean, I don't know whether you know, my school was in one of the earlier reports that have already been published, yes. and I found it almost unbearable to read one small section of what you and your colleagues have been dealing with now for years.
Yes, I think it would have been very difficult for anybody who had been present in any of the settings that we investigated. However, as professionals outside that, I myself, of course, have been trained and spent my working life dealing with very complex and difficult issues around vulnerable children and adults. So certainly not immune to the impact of hearing these horrible accounts, but perhaps better prepared.
Yes. Could you explain to the uninitiated exactly what mandatory reporting entails and why it is such an important recommendation in the report?
I will try to very briefly, but to say that we would require individuals in certain specific roles to report allegations of child sexual abuse where they receive a disclosure, where they witness abuse, or where they observe indicators of abuse. Now, the categories we're talking about are anybody working in what's called regulated activity, like children's homes or play groups or whatever, or those who are in positions of trust. Both of those include volunteers as well, but it covers those in positions of trust and the police.
And this is because of all of the instances you examined of allegations being made, people finding the courage to come forward and then being at best ignored, at worst, of course, blamed. The phrase institutions prioritised their reputations over the protection of children will resonate with anybody who's been close to these sort of crimes.
Yes, you sum it up very well. That's exactly the reason, and the evidence from the beginning and all the way through, which we considered very carefully about the question of mandatory reporting, convinced us that this was a very significant step to take in the better protection of children in the future.
It's an incredible piece of work, and I don't know if it's appropriate to say thank you for undertaking it, but I will do. Thank you for doing this.
It's very, very kind of you, and we also appreciate the focus you brought to it through your public platform.
Professor Alexis Jay, thank you, the author, as we said, of the chairwoman of the inquiry into child sexual abuse, which has today published its concluding report calling for urgent action to ensure children are better protected from sexual abuse. And regular listeners will know that my interest in this was born of discovering what had happened to some of my classmates at school, and of course many corners of the media, for reasons that I'll never understand, continue to pay a lot more attention to the false allegations of Carl Beach, described at the time by the Metropolitan Police as credible and true, but quite why anybody would not want a lot more attention paid to child sexual abuse allegations, a lot more attention paid to children finding the courage to come forward, and a lot more attention paid to allegations that are historically true and are historically solid is something that I will and continue to never understand. What is the motivation of people who don't want these allegations to be properly and fully examined in the light of day? I'll leave you to speculate about that, but some of the answers you come up with will be some of the reasons why so many of these children have been betrayed and let down over the decades, even after finding the courage to come forward. 12:55 is the time. Back to matters political. We've got 3 minutes before Sheila gets here, and the door is still closed.
Yes, but Tory Party Chairman Jake Berry has just gone into number 10. And of course, as the Tory Party Chairman, he's a key figure in terms of party management. He was formerly chairman of the Northern Research Group, which of course led the Red Wall Conservative MPs appointed to the key post as party chairman. Slightly, he at Tory conference, he found himself in slightly hot water when he suggested that people should go out and get a better paid job if they were struggling financially.
He's what's known in the trade as a charmer, I think it's fair to say. So this is, again, probably some form of negotiation underway. Liz Truss possibly taking a little while to accept that the game is up. I mean, the game is over, and now there'll be...
Or they're trying to sort a process.
That's what I mean. They'll be discussing the means under which she'll be trying to save some sort of face. She may even be trying to construct some sort of escape route, and Brady will be...
To make it orderly.
Yes, Brady will be concerned with making it as orderly and as frictionless as possible.
So, as I was saying earlier, and I was saying this in when we first spoke, James, the indication I've had, and it's difficult to sort of, you have to talk around it, but the indication I've had from very senior people in number 10 is they know the game's up. It's over.
I think we'll probably end the programme with that clip from Sir Charles Walker with which we almost began it, because this was a moment, wasn't it, Theo, when you realised last night. I mean, this is the point at which bookmakers may have started paying out on bets that Liz Truss would be gone by the end of the year. Shall we have another listen to that?
To be perfectly honest, this whole affair is inexcusable. It is a pitiful reflection on the Conservative Parliamentary Party at every level. And it reflects really badly, obviously, on the government of the day. I think it's a shambles and a disgrace. I think it is utterly appalling.
So you seem quietly...
I'm livid. And, you know, I really shouldn't say this, but I hope all those people that put Liz Truss in number 10, I hope it was worth it. I hope it was worth it for the ministerial red box. I hope it was worth it to sit round the cabinet table, because the damage they have done to our party is extraordinary.
I'm sorry, it's very difficult to convey. You look just furious about this.
I am. I've had enough. I've had enough of talentless people putting their tick in the right box, not because it's in the national interest, but because it's in their own personal interest to achieve ministerial position. Unless we get our act together and behave like grown-ups, I'm afraid many hundreds of my colleagues, perhaps 200, will be leaving at the behest of their electorate.
Gosh, BBC interview there. I think it was Ione Wells doing a really, really good job of just letting Sir Charles Walker breathe in circumstances that I am now almost bored of describing as unprecedented. I will actually leave you with something else, I think, as opposed to the words of Sir Charles Walker. I'll leave you with the columns of David Frost, 4 columns from the last few months. I'm backing Liz Truss for PM to lead the talented team that will deliver for Britain. Why Kwarteng is right and Carney is wrong. Don't give up on Truss yet, she can rebound. And finally, Liz Truss has to go if the Tory party is to have any chance of recovering. I have said it before and I will say it again. When you put these clowns into driving seats, when you allow them to infect the public space with their ignorance and their arrogance, well, we're all finding out what follows. 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 finding out what follows, 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 finding out what